Welcome to show. I am Clint, and I am here with
Devo.
And we have no
Gooch.
He's like, let's just say he's on hiatus.
He's invisible on the internet, and he's invisible in real life right now.
Is he really? He's gone internet silence.
He's always said he's invisible on the internet. Like, he's barely on Facebook. He has a Twitter and never uses it.
Yeah, but the government could still find him if they wanted to.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, they could show up at his doorstep and capture him, take him to a facility and anally probe him. And
Megan's Law.
But he might like that, though. I think they would have to find some deviant ways to punish him and torture him, because I'm not sure that you could torture him by, conventional means.
Have you seen Civil War?
Yeah, I did.
The upside down sink scene. Like, that might be like one thing that he would not like.
You think he wouldn't like being upside down?
Well, I mean, when your head is being submerged underwater, slowly, painfully.
But you know what? When I was watching that scene, I was like, this fool's not going to die. Like, his nose is still above the sink.
Well, apparently, yeah. I felt the same way, but from that angle, I guess he must have been lowered, or like just the way the angle was. I mean, you're not going to have an actor like in fear of drowning, I guess. So
can you die from just being held, from being suspended upside down?
I'm assuming so. I mean, like, all the blood's rushing to your head, and eventually you would probably asphyxiate yourself somehow. Like, maybe you end up swallowing.
And it'd probably be terrible, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So either way, it'd be that or the drowning kills him. But in that one, I think when they show the water going over, I'm assuming he just dies.
So let's talk Civil War before we get into our real topic for just a couple seconds.
Yeah,
your opinions.
I loved it. So I see it as a Captain America movie, not the greatest way to make it a Captain America movie, but as an Avengers movie, it was fantastic.
So you viewed it more as an Avengers movie than a Captain America movie.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was definitely centered around Captain America.
It was,
sure.
But it's like it's like if Avengers and Avengers 2 just mated with Winter Soldier. Like, I see why they're calling it a Captain America movie, but I felt that it tied too much into Avengers to where it should have, to me, it was just Avengers 2.5. And I know the big storyline was behind Cap and Bucky, but the fact that it revolved so heavily around Iron Man and it just incorporated everybody else, and half the movie is the Avengers.
You know, the really interesting thing, I was looking at it and I was thinking, okay, this is a Captain America movie, so obviously it kind of has to be from his perspective to an extent, but you can't make Iron Man like evil. You have to kind of make him like be resolute about something that's wrong, but then like admit that he's wrong in the end, right? And that's what they did
For Iron Man,
okay, because he's still a good guy, right?
Yeah,
So I thought it was interesting when they let them fight each other.
Yeah,
you had this thing where you had to kind of decide who wins that fight, or do you make it a draw? Because obviously, when you're going to compare, Tony Stark to Steve Rogers is a biologically enhanced person, and Tony Stark isn't. But Tony Stark's suit, there was this one moment where he said, "Okay, calculate the way in which we can like overcome Captain America," and it kind of did that, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, it just tracked all his movements and started recognizing patterns and determining, because, I mean, Captain America's got a certain fighting style, supposedly, and apparently, at least in that fight, don't know if it was emotionally charged or what, but it sounded like the suit was able to recognize the fact that he was using certain patterns and certain moves over and over and over, so able to calculate and then just defend itself based on that information, which is kind of cool.
And plus, I mean, he was going against, like, he already took out Bucky by ripping his arm off. So he already
blasting his arm off.
Yeah. He'd already taken out Bucky, and then he had to fight Captain America after already doing that. I mean, ultimately he lost, but that was only because his suit got like damaged.
Yeah. Well, he lost because Cap spared him.
Well,
like Cap, I mean, if he really wanted to kill Tony Stark, that shield would have come down his head.
Well, I guess, because I mean, his weakness is that thing on his heart, and he kind of tried to destroy it or whatever.
Well, I mean, it's no longer in his heart, but that's what powers the suit.
Yeah. That's right. He wasn't his thing anymore.
And then, I mean, that's what happened to War Machine, right? He got blasted in the arc reactor, and then he just plummeted however far, and the suit just crippled him.
I thought Tony Stark was kind of an asshole. Like, even after, like, I'm like, first of all, Falcon didn't actually shoot War Machine. He just moved out of the way, and the fool got hit, and he said sorry, and then he just blasted him. I was like, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
I was like, you're an asshole. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you think of it from Tony's perspective, right? His best friend is unconscious, and for all he knows, is dead.
Okay, but it wasn't Falcon's fault.
He likes the Rhodey more than Falcon.
Well, obviously, but I thought it was really cool the way they played out, like, the distinction between these two sides, and it was interesting that they kind of made the the crux of this conflict hinge on the decisions of Scarlett Johansson's character of Black Widow. Because if she did not let them go, they probably maybe they would have won that battle, or maybe they would have lost that one battle that was at the airplane, but they wouldn't have gotten away if it wasn't for her.
No, I mean, because Black Panther's right there.
He was
hot
right
on
there.
the
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he's already proven that he can take down.
He was badass. By the way. He was so badass.
Amazing. Yeah, and Spider-Man was awesome too.
The character and everything. I love the new Spider-Man, by the way.
Yeah,
it's finally feels like a Peter Parker. Like it feels like the type of character that Spider-Man's supposed to be, rather than like Andy Garfield is not a nerd. I'm sorry, he's not a nerd.
Yeah, and Andy Garfield. I mean, comparing Andy to Tobey Maguire, Andy blows Tobey Maguire out of the water. Like he had the look of Peter Parker, he had the mannerisms of Peter Parker, and he's skinny, lanky like Peter Parker is, and Spider-Man is, and he was a way better representation of Spider-Man than Tobey Maguire. Tom Holland, on the other hand, especially now that they're going with the teenage Spider-Man, best film iteration.
Perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah. So I'm actually really excited for Homecoming. I think it's gonna be a fantastic film.
I think that, first of all, the Black Panther got me really excited. Really excited.
Yeah.
And I thought that the way that they did his character was good, especially like they kind of gave everyone like a foil. Like everyone, when they matched up, there were like a reason for each person to be not just like, oh, we happen to be standing here.
Yeah.
Like he wanted Bucky. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
like he didn't really have a side, but like he was on Team Iron Man because he was going to go whoop Bucky's ass.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the good introduction to a character.
And even the villain, Zemo.
Oh, that was
Baron
cool.
Zemo.
That was really cool. And that actor was good too.
Yeah, from what's his name, Daniel Bruhl or something.
Yeah,
from
and I thought the
Black
way
Bastards.
I know I was with some person I saw it with kind of criticized it, but I kind of liked the way that he understood that he was a badass, but he wasn't good enough to beat them.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to play them against each other. I thought it was just a great way to orchestrate the whole thing.
Because I mean, you look at Avengers, and then you look at Avengers 2. Ironically, Loki and Thor both think that they are greater than the Avengers or greater than those people, and it's their egos that kind of help get in the way of their being victorious.
Yeah.
But Zemo recognized that, and so he's like, all right, how do you cripple an empire? You destroy it from within.
Yeah.
And just everything he went through just to mastermind this entire destruction of the Avengers, I thought was amazing. I loved it.
Fantastic film.
Fantastic.
Better than Guardians of the Galaxy?
I don't know. See, it in terms of like a Marvel movie, like I think I would say yes, because there was more about this film that made me smile as opposed to Guardians. Like Guardians, I had no expectations going into, and it completely surprised me. Now, I love the storyline, I love the humor, I love the characters, I love how they interact. Same thing with this. It's like I got all the best of what I loved about all the characters, but then I also got to see more Vision. I got to see more Scarlet Witch. Even Hawkeye, when he came back, he acted different. Like he was a different character. And then you get surprised with Spider-Man, you get surprised with Black Panther, you get Giant Man in there.
That was so
cool.
Know?
It's just like there's just so much about this film that even knowing some of the stuff, like, spoilers that you read on the internet and whatnot, I came out being like, all right, this was awesome. This is great. This gets me ready for Infinity War.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Doctor Strange, you saw the trailer?
Yeah.
Look crazy.
I'm excited for that.
That looks
a lot of people are just saying it's a Marvel version of Inception, but it is what it is, right?
It could be, but I liked Inception.
Yeah.
And I would love to see a Marvel version of Inception.
Yeah.
It looked awesome.
And now it's a magical, cosmic sort of thing. I think it's going to work really, really well.
And it was weird to hear Benedict Cumberbatch with an American accent for the first. That's the first time I've heard him use an American accent.
Yeah, I can't think of any. Star Trek.
He kind of still had. He didn't talk like an American. He still had like a something else.
Did he?
He did. It was. I don't.
It was almost like he was like trying too hard to be like an evil character. Like he's like, I'm Khan.
Yeah.
Almost like he was a pro wrestler or something.
It's this weird thing about these Brits, especially like I was watching Peaky Blinders recently,
yeah.
and Cillian Murphy's in there with Sam Neill, and they're both using like their native accents, I'm assuming, and they sound completely different than they have. And the weird thing is, like, I wasn't introduced to them as British. I mean, they're British actors, or I guess Sam Neill's Irish, but you don't hear their voices. Like, it's like House. You know
I can't even think of a single Sam Neill movie where I've heard his original accent.
Well, this is the first time I've
Jurassic
heard
Park, any Jurassic Park.
Same thing with Cillian Murphy.
Cillian Murphy.
That's the first time I remember in a movie that I've seen.
28 Days Later.
Did he have British? I have to see that movie.
I think so. Because it was in England.
It would definitely put place in England.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had his accent in that movie.
He probably
for
did,
sure.
you're right. But
yeah.
that was like the first time I'd ever seen him in a movie, though.
True.
Probably.
Yeah, and his dick.
I forgot about that. I need to remember that. Okay, so let's get to our real topic. Everyone, that's the funny thing. Everyone's been. It's probably going to be at this point, like, promoted as the Starkiller show, and then people are like, "What the fuck are they talking about Marvel for 10 minutes? Can they just talk about Starkiller
it's
already?"
right.
But you know what? Screw y'all. Now here we go.
So our deviants.
We're going to bring up a character who, I mean, it's this weird thing about how Star Wars has been in the media spotlight for the past year, and it's going to continue to be for the foreseeable future now that Disney's taken over and they make a movie every year.
Yep.
But the one character that has rarely been talked about is this character who, and Devo brought this up as maybe possibly one of the most powerful characters in the Star Wars universe, which is Galen Merrick.
Yes, known as Starkiller.
Starkiller.
From the Star Wars The Force Unleashed video game series.
Yes.
Now, the reason why this idea popped in my head is because I was browsing through some of the headlines, and on my Feedly reader, I have a Star Wars section. And one of this, there was a YouTube video, but I'll have to post the name on the post somewhere, but I forgot where it came from. And the video was kind of just an introspective about how powerful Starkiller really was. And I've recently been playing Star Wars The Force Unleashed again. Probably the second time since it originally came out, and I'm going to start on the second one when I'm done with that. But it's amazing to me. It sucks too because now he doesn't matter. Since Disney has their whole.
That was one of my big
legends
questions. It's not canon anymore. Is this confirmed?
Confirmed.
And I could see why in a lot of cases because the dual endings. And I know that they chose the light side endings in the novels, and those are like the canon endings originally.
Yeah.
But it kind of does mess with a lot of things if you look at just the story.
Right. And one thing that so the very beginning of the game, which in a game, I guess technical standpoint, the fact that you start the game as Darth Vader is probably the greatest decision any Star Wars video game creator could have done.
That was
right?
Remember the demo?
Yeah.
It was just awesome.
Yeah, because I mean you're just walking around as Darth Vader on Kashyyyk, and you're just all right. I'm gonna just toss this Wookiee into that TIE fighter right there, and it's. What's great is that the game was built on really. I mean, it's a clever title, right? It's Unleashing the Force. It's everything we've seen in the movies, even after Revenge of the Sith, and even other video games that you've been that have been out there. It's the Force powers are really just like push, pull, jump, speed, reflexes. In
the movies you're talking
in the movies,
about. Yeah.
And
basic
then
stuff.
like
serves the purpose of the plot.
Right. Palpatine had lightning. Force lightning, things like that. And then you get the Jedi Outcast series or the Dark Forces games where they kind of expand a little bit on the Force powers, but it's really just grounded to what you see in the movies. And what I love about the Force Unleashed is that it's those similar groundings, but they're amplified, right? So it's like what would happen. It almost felt like what would happen if either Luke or Anakin really tapped into like a true nature of the Force and just really like let it go. Like what would be the outcome? And it's interesting, too, because when Vader's fighting Melek's father on the first level, and he's like, tell me where your master is, because I sense somebody here more powerful than you, and the only person there is the kid. Yeah. Kind of shows that, all right, like, to me, the first thing that popped in my head is like, well, does that mean that this kid's more powerful than Anakin?
But you know what? The funny thing is, it's like that same idea that like Qui-Gon comes to Tatooine and like, oh, there's this kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, I want to see what this kid could be, right? And you had this idea of like, this kid is imbued with all this power, but the trajectory of that child's, destiny could be shaped by the outside world, depending on the child's choices, and that's a big aspect of the game as well. This whole dichotomy between killing, even though you feel like it's just, and not killing, even though not killing them allows that person to live and potentially cause more harm. Yeah. But it's the idea that personally for you, you don't kill because you're good. And this is the same type of thing that you find in that first scene, interestingly, where Vader chooses not to let those stormtroopers the stormtroopers kill the kid. Yeah. Obviously it's for nefarious means, but nevertheless. Yeah. Right?
And one thing that I found interesting that I never really picked up from the game or the stories or anything like that, which I saw from this video, is the dude was saying that in the next, because apparently in the Force Unleashed, when you actually become Starkiller, you take control, he's 17.
Yeah, okay.
And then he doesn't look like it, right? He looks like Sam Witwer,
who's like a 30-year-old guy.
Yeah. Anyways, so one thing that I thought was interesting is that he was saying that from being a child to that point in the game, Vader, I mean, that guy's like Starkiller, all he knows in his life is what Vader teaches him. And Vader hasn't taught him necessarily about the Force and hasn't taught him about the Sith and what it means to be a Sith. Because with the Sith, it's really, the rule of two. It seems like it's the Sith are always craving power. But Vader was able to create an apprentice who wasn't craving that power. So that apprentice wasn't going to overthrow him. It wasn't until some part in the story where the Emperor comes in and Vader's plan gets foiled to where Vader kind of turns on Malak and just pretty much tells him, hey, you're my tool to overthrow the Emperor, at which point that kind of changes Galen Merrick's entire view on what he's doing. But so that's why he's kind of starting to overthrow, at least, or go up against Darth Vader and try to kill him, is because Darth Vader turned his back on him. And I thought that was an interesting standpoint of you can get these dark side users and this being that's maybe not manipulated by the dark side, but essentially grown by the dark side, but not necessarily the ways of the Sith. And then watching that video just now made me start thinking about Kylo Ren.
Wow, man, I hadn't considered that. When I was thinking about this story before we did this podcast, I was thinking to myself, there's this whole interplay between this rule of two, but there technically being three at any given time, right? And so, I mean, this goes back to the Darth Maul thing and whatever have you about the secret, and then there's like a secret apprentice, and then Darth Maul's not dead or something like that, and he's still around and doing things and so forth. But then there's this big thing about the secret apprentice. It's the idea behind the whole Starkiller story, right?
Yeah.
But then you have this idea that, like, Vader is using him as a tool, like you said, to overthrow Palpatine so that there could still only be two.
Yeah.
But then there's this interplay between Vader and Palpatine where Palpatine, in one of the storylines, if you choose in the right way, if you choose in the particular way, like, he becomes the Emperor's apprentice.
Yeah.
Right? And so...
Because he kills Vader.
He kills Vader. He has a different suit, and people complain it looked like Boba Fett and Vader put together, and whatever have you.
I thought it was badass.
But it looked cool. But I mean, people could say the same thing about Kylo Ren too,
right?
And which is interesting because the Kylo Ren outfit looks very similar to what that Starkiller outfit was when he became the Emperor's apprentice.
It does.
It does.
It's got similar,
but it still looks awesome. Yeah. Whatever. I don't care.
And it was inspired by his grandfather. So
and so I thought it was interesting that you have this idea, and then even beyond that, there's in the second movie, I believe second game, there's something about like how the clone would be the Emperor's assassin, but that the Emperor was still looking for an apprentice. And I always forget this idea that Palpatine is looking for an apprentice, but he doesn't actually, because the whole idea about there being two is that you have the apprentice so that when you die, you could ostensibly have that person take over for you, and then they could have their own apprentice.
Right.
But of course, that apprentice always has an apprentice before you die, and Palpatine supposedly has mastered the art of never dying, so he doesn't need an apprentice. Technically, he just needs someone to do his bidding for him, so he doesn't have to do it and risk his own life. So he's not actually looking for someone to succeed him, which creates this like interesting dynamic between them in the game.
And one thing that again was brought up in this video is that Palpatine is not looking for somebody to succeed him; he's looking for somebody to replace Vader, because when Palpatine first met Anakin, like, he and the Jedi Council knew that there was something special about this boy. And as he grew and his power in the Force grew, they knew that maybe he was the chosen one, right? And so that's why Palpatine kind of, again, with the Secret Apprentice thing, he's, whispering in Anakin's ear and saying, when he used Dooku and he had Anakin kill Dooku, he's like, oh, well, the Tusken Raiders killed your mom. You want revenge. It's no different than that. It's all good. Yeah. So it's things like that to where he's secretly molding Anakin. And Palpatine had the expectation that he was going to get the chosen one and that was going to be his apprentice. But then he failed in his battle against Obi-Wan, and he had to be rebuilt. And the guy put it in this awesome analogy. It's like you're working so hard and you're working towards a Lamborghini, and you've got the expectation of a Lamborghini. And when the time finally comes to receive your Lamborghini, something happens and you get a Ford Mustang. It's still a great car, but it's not
the Lambo.
It's not the Lambo. And I was like, that's actually a really interesting way to look at it, to where Palpatine views Darth Vader as damaged and a ghost and a shell of what was supposed to be. So he's incredibly disappointed. And that's kind of that's a theme that's played on a lot in the comics now, to where Palpatine's always putting Vader in these shitty and fucked up situations to really prove himself. And it's almost like Palpatine's purposefully trying to kill Darth Vader just to show him that you're a failure and you're not worthy enough to be my apprentice. Even though in the movies he's still there.
But if he lives,
they're one-on-one, right?
Then he proves me wrong, and then I've got nothing to lose,
right? But Palpatine, even in the comics, it always feels like it's like he's got the expectation that Anakin's going to die and Vader's going to die, and Palpatine's going to be the one, maybe not directly by his hands, but he's going to be the cause of Vader's death.
You know, there's there's this weird thing where you mentioned the whole Lambo Mustang analogy, and I always feel like, and this is something that I don't necessarily see in. It's a different dynamic with the Jedi, but with the Sith, there's always this idea that like you need to finish your training. You haven't finished your training. I will teach you the last thing that I need to teach you, because there's this interplay of power between if the master teaches the disciple everything that he knows, he enables the disciple to be empowered enough to defeat the master. So the master always can never teach him everything, right? But then you get this degradation of knowledge, of skill, of Sith ability, because the guys that are here, like Darth Vader, never finished his training. The Starkiller never finished his training. Kylo Ren never finished his training. Darth Maul never finished. So, okay, who has all the training? Like Palpatine? Well, what happens when Palpatine croaks?
Yeah.
Okay, so now Vader's left, or Vader's dead too. Supposedly, there's no more Sith. But okay, so now Kylo Ren, like, who is he gonna get? I mean, of course, I understand there's like this Force ghost thing that could like teach them, and there's, I mean, the holocron thing is not really part of the canon, so I don't really.
Well, it is now.
Okay, but so is the holocron ever mentioned in a movie?
Not in a movie, but in Star Wars Rebels, there's a scene where Ezra, one of the new characters, Darth Maul actually is using Ezra to gain access to the dark holocron.
So, and I know that
Sith holocron.
I know in the old Knights of the Old Republic, a lot of the characters were interacting with holocrons, and that's how they got their knowledge.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, this whole holocron idea is either not mentioned by Palpatine or Vader, or they're just not aware of it. And I don't know about any of the outside stories talking about that. But there's this whole idea that the apprentice is not as powerful.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that they have the capability to be more powerful than maybe the master. And one thing I wanted to bring up with you, and this is probably a good time to do it, is talking about the abilities of Starkiller himself. Yeah. And in the games, he obviously defeats Vader at some points. He defeats that other master at one point if you choose to go bad. Rot or Ram or whatever his name was.
Ram Koda?
Yeah. He defeats him. Interestingly enough, gets waxed by Palpatine every time he tries. Yeah. Just torn down by Palpatine.
And it doesn't matter what side you choose, I think he's always killed by Palpatine. So even if you choose
a
light side,
one time by his perfect clone.
Well, that's in the second game. Force Unleashed 2, yeah. So, but in the first one, if you choose light side ending, then I think Vader kills you. Yeah, because
you get martyred, and then Leia takes on the family crest as the
which I thought
Alliance.
Was a great tie-in to A New Hope. And then in the dark side path, Palpatine ends up killing him, but then resurrecting him as his Sith assassin.
And that's where you get the Emperor's Apprentice idea.
Yeah, so it's clear that at least in the video game, he's unable to defeat the Emperor.
So he can't beat the Emperor.
But he could beat Vader.
He could beat Vader. Yeah. It's shown that there's a way for him to do that. Yeah. And a lot of people will say, and I don't know what this guy said in this article, but a lot of people will say the stuff that Starkiller does in the games is stuff that no other character has ever done in a movie. I don't know about the comics, but in a movie, and by virtue of that, he's more powerful than them. But I think that like you were saying earlier, this idea of the Force Unleashed itself was sort of a showcase for the idea of the Force being used and applying it to various things. So he did things that you hadn't seen other characters do, but that not necessarily they weren't capable. Because I think even if you there's another example I have of Mace Windu in the cartoon, the Clone Wars. He does stuff in the Clone Wars cartoon that he never did in the movie, like crazy stuff. Yeah, you're just like, this fool's unbelievable. Yeah, in the cartoon. Yeah, and it's the same thing here, where like he's pulling down a Star Destroyer. Like, it's not like Vader can't do that. He just never the situation never arose. Yeah, and then same thing with showcasing his
Starkiller's abilities. Like when you're fighting an ATST, right? Like it gets to a point and you do the quick time moves, and he's like lifting him up in the air and slicing him in half, or he's like crumpling him up into balls and like tossing him aside. Yeah, it's like crazy things like that, to where he's able to like lift up a rancor and like like he's not like ripping it in half, but he's like slamming it around and tossing it. It's like he does just not whacked out, but just unparalleled feats of showcasing his ability in the Force that if we would have saw this in the movie, then it's like, okay, then I haven't seen at least a Force wielder as strong as what I saw in the game.
No way.
And I always felt that the game was supposed to be like, hey, you're this character who's trained in the Force, but he's still kind of untapped. And I mean, he could just do some awesome, amazing stuff. But one thing that frustrated me about the game personally was that as you progress through the game, they introduce characters that are prepared to fight you off. So it's like, you're not just fighting stormtroopers, you're fighting special stormtroopers that have special armor and reflector shields that prevent you from using the Force on them or will block and deflect your lightsaber. It's like,
which doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah, it's like, well, what's the point? Like I mean, I think there are like some blades or some certain items that are tainted with magic in the Star Wars universe that can deflect a lightsaber. Or I know in the comics there was what do you call it, the Similari, which is like this creature that just for whatever reason it deflects any ability of the Force. So like you could walk up to Luke Skywalker with it and he wouldn't be able to use any of his Force powers as long as you got this creature thing around you. So I mean, there's stuff like that, but it's like in the game, it's like there's these creatures on the Felucia planet that, I mean, they're just I don't know, like plant cavemen sort of thing, and they had these force fields that were able to block your lightsaber. It's like, what the fuck? Why do we even need a lightsaber?
I know,
like it's pointless.
I mean, the game obviously was created to like have this idea of like, we've never played a game where they were involving all the elements of Force usage so like fluidly, and you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
just that whole thing where you felt like you really could, what it would be like to be a really powerful. And I mean, even Sam Witwer said like you have Vader, and then you have Palpatine.
Yeah.
And, they're awesome. Vader is Vader. He's the most sinister. Or I mean, Palpatine's the most sinister. He's the most conniving, right?
Yeah.
Vader has the greatest Force powers, right? Because that's what they've always said, right?
Yeah.
But Starkiller's the most badass.
Yeah.
And that was his whole idea behind it.
Yeah.
And I think they really did that. Especially
I think so
when
too.
just the scene where he's pulling down the Star Destroyer. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, how many more things are more badass than that in video game history?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, like I was replaying that and I'm sitting there thinking like, this takes Luke's, pulling the X-Wing out of the water. And like, granted, Yoda was, I don't know, what, 900 years old, and he was old and decrepit at that point. But like, it made it seem like even Yoda was having like, it wasn't just something where he was like, okay, like I'm gonna just lift this up and move it. Like it was like he's like, okay, I've got to really focus. I got to like, it was almost straining him. And then even when he was done, he was like, like Yoda in his prime. I wonder how easy that feat would have been. And then you've got this dark side apprentice of Darth Vader who's reaching out into the sky and pulling down a Star Destroyer, which is, what do you think? What, 100, 200 times larger than an X-Wing?
I mean, it's the size of a city.
Yeah,
it's easily the size of a city.
And it's not like he was pulling it down with ease or anything, because the whole mechanic of the game, it's like, all right, you got to tilt and you got to push. Yeah. But like, he's like, it's the Star Destroyer is going one way, and he's like pulling it off course, and he's twisting it and turning it, and then like pulling it down. It's like, and then he brings it crashing into the city. It's like, that's awesome. That's badass. I haven't seen, even in the movies, and this came out after Revenge of the Sith. It's like nobody had the gall to take this person who's supposed to be the chosen one and show that he's got maybe not absolute power, but just this amazing, tremendous power. I mean, all we really get from him is that he's able to tap into his hatred, become super fast with a lightsaber, but then get, 3 of his 4 appendages cut off and burnt alive.
Vader, I know, he turned to a nugget, but like, and I will tell that nugget story one day.
Yeah.
But it's this weird thing where, they make Vader out to be the, and it's, it's always this weird thing where like always the idea is that the bad guy is technically more powerful than the good guy.
Yeah.
But because he's bad, that creates some inherent flaw within him that will be the ultimate undoing. He'll be his downfall.
Yeah.
Whereas the good guy might not technically, because let's be honest, like if you look at like Ultron, like he's a badass.
Yeah.
He should not have lost, but he's cocky or he's arrogant.
It always seems like it's their ego.
Exactly.
Somehow gets in the best of them, and they're unable to see or foresee, how they can be brought down. It's like,
it's the same thing that happens to Vader. It's not necessarily the ego, but it's the weakness that he had for the love of his son and all these things like that, right?
Yeah.
It's, that he's ultimately good inside, right?
Yeah.
But And it's a weird thing because, like, Palpatine's the most powerful person. I mean, he, like you guys said, he basically beat Yoda in the
Revenge of the Sith.
In the Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
He basically beat him.
Yeah.
And you have this idea that, oh, the bad guy's more powerful, but then the good guy has this one thing about him that obviously makes him, and the Starkiller is no different, right? Because he has all this power, but he doesn't know how to harness it. My question to you is that all these characters that they say are really powerful tend to be human. And do you think that because the nature of being human, it like somehow amplifies the power of the Force within them? Because I know Yoda and this and that, but Yoda didn't beat Palpatine. And then I know that there is whatever. Even Shakti got killed by Starkiller in the games. Even
she was a bitch.
But if you look at all these other like non-human characters, they got torn up by the human characters. Is that just a function of we want to see the humans be the most powerful because we're human beings making these movies? Or
I think that's interesting because at least in terms of the movies themselves, for the dark side, we only see one non-human.
For the dark side,
yeah,
Maul,
yeah.
Even in the Knights
I mean,
of the
he's
Republic?
humanoid. In the what?
In Knights of the Republic, there's not some non-humans?
Well, but I'm talking about the movies.
Oh, okay,
right?
okay,
so in the
okay,
movies,
okay.
we get Darth Maul. Every other dark side user is human.
So far, yeah.
And then then you look at the light side. It's like they've got so many Force users on the light side. Like Yoda, I think is the top on the light side.
So you think it's just a function of there only being two? But I mean, this other guy. What's that tall? This new evil guy's name in the movie? I forgot his damn name.
Kylo Ren?
No, the guy, his master.
Oh, Supreme Leader Snoke.
He's not human.
I think he is.
Oh.
I think he's going to be a human that's
got deformed or something.
Just destroyed and deformed by the Force. But what I was trying to get at with the whole dark side thing is that they allude to it multiple times in the movies to where it's like, yeah, the dark side's stronger. It's more powerful, but it'll just eat you up alive.
Is that the reason why maybe these like the guys that are considered the most powerful are the ones that the Sith identify and want them more than like these like mediocre Force users?
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
it's like two, right?
Right. It's like if there was an opportunity to turn Mace Windu to the dark side, I'm pretty sure Sidious would have gone for it. But ever since he found Anakin, he's like, okay, that's my long game. That's my end game.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn this guy, the chosen one, who's going to bring balance to the Force, and we're just going to wipe out the light. But then, things got messed up, and yeah, for the most part, he kind of got what he wanted. But I mean, still, there's plenty of Jedi around, and then all of a sudden, who's the one that comes and snuffs out Palpatine? His apprentice's kid.
Okay, in the second Force Unleashed game,
yeah,
the main character is a clone.
Yeah.
Okay. But that clone gets torn up by the quote unquote perfect clone that Vader made,
yeah.
right? And it's like, his whole thing is like, oh, I'm the clone that has free will, right?
Yeah,
and I can make my own decisions, and I'm like, that it fundamentally makes him imperfect theoretically, right? But you have this idea now, but there's this idea at the end of when they capture Vader, and he's gonna kill him. And he said, and the what's the guy's name? Ram Koda.
Yeah, Ram Koda.
He says, "Don't kill him," right? And that's like a moment where he has to make a decision, like I mentioned before, whether he's good or bad. But one of the things he does say is, we need to question him because we don't know if Starkiller is dead. We don't know what happened to the real Starkiller, and it's obviously unknown. I think. And so, is he alive? Could he appear in a Star Wars movie? Would you like him to appear in a Star Wars movie?
I think it would be interesting, but I think it would be more interesting if Vader was still around. Now,
is he Snoke?
I don't think so.
No one's ever mentioned that.
No, that could be interesting. There are some theories about Rey's parents, though.
Starkiller could be a Rey's parent?
Not necessarily.
He did have a chick.
Do you want me to go into it?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean...
So it has to do with cloning.
And that's... okay, this is what I want to ask you before we go into this, about cloning.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I think... And I guess this is like a modern topic, a postmodern topic for us now, too, about cloning.
Yeah.
But in the Star Wars universe, there tends to be like this undertone of like the morality behind cloning. And I don't think it's talked about so much in the movies because you don't get to see the whole Grand Admiral Thrawn story where the clones go crazy and that's how they get rid of the clones and everything like that, because that's in between episode 3 and 4 and all the stuff that we don't know about yet in a lot of ways.
Grand Admiral was after Jedi.
Oh, I mean, I know that, but I mean like this whole idea of like the crazed clones, right?
Yeah.
and that like cloning, it's the people aren't adjusted properly.
Yeah,
right?
which is kind of how the original story, the ideas behind cloning were with the original stories before, obviously, the prequels came out.
Yeah, and so I'm just curious to you, like, do you think that this whole cloning thing, and like, is there something about how the clones are like immune to the Force or something? They can't have Force.
So that was part of the ideas with the original
Yeah.
cloning thing, or at least that I think that was a theory that was kind of popular. I mean, this is definitely way before the internet and stuff like that. Is the Clone Wars were supposed to be these creatures or clones that were created that were immune to the Force, so that way they couldn't be manipulated by Jedi and things like that, and that they were specifically supposed to be for the Empire. And then one of the reasons why there are no clones anymore is because they go crazy. And I don't know if it was like the Force that made them go crazy, but they kind of touched on it in the Clone Wars cartoon to where there's a couple of clones that, as they got a little bit older and they spent a lot of time around Jedi, like they started going a little bit, nutso, and they were like kind of losing their mind. But
if you guys could have seen his face when he said that, it's perfect.
yeah, I crossed my eyes and pointing him in different directions. But
I mean, is that something that you could see in the future movies or even a spin-off movie being like because I could see that really being the foundation for a really good movie where you have this character who's a clone but maybe doesn't know it or something like that. And like as they go insane, maybe it's too adult themed for a Star Wars movie, but it's a really interesting idea.
Or like, because like even if you think about the movie Multiplicity, right?
Yes.
Where what's his name makes a clone of himself, and it's more aggressive.
Yeah,
and
then they
like
make
that.
the clone the clone.
So he's cloning a clone, and he clones a clone. By the time he's the fourth clone, he's got kind of a dumb clone, and that'd be kind of interesting if they touched on something like that, to where, like, what if
like an Vice
Starkiller, like,
thing?
huh?
Like an Of Mice of Men type thing, where you have like this
a little bit, yeah.
powerful
But like,
clone?
think of Starkiller in Force Unleashed 2. Like, what if that clone that you're playing as was a clone of a clone, which is why he wasn't the perfect clone.
Yeah.
Because I mean, at that point, I'm assuming that there are, if I don't remember correctly, but I think there were obviously more clones, and they had to be clones of the original Starkiller. Because this clone had memories of Juno and the past life and reflections of that. What happens if, that clone doesn't work, and then, or you do get a clone that's like good, and then you make a clone of that?
Yeah.
Or like, and this one's maybe better than the other clones. So it's like, if something happens to that clone, do you make a clone of that, or do you just go back to, because I'm assuming you can only use a sample so often.
And I'm just curious because he's making multiple clones, so the idea that maybe Starkiller is alive is still there, because who else is he making a clone from? Like
Or-
just a
or
piece
they-
of like some blood sample? I don't.
Or he's got the body somewhere, like he's able to recover the body
Yeah.
somehow. I mean, I think that would be kind of interesting, but there are some theories about some use of cloning in Episode 8.
Okay, let's
All right.
bust into it
So,
before we get out of here.
And it's not confirmed by anybody. It's just a crazy theory that I heard that made me go, huh. And I don't know if it was a script leak or just somebody just coming up with this random idea, but it gets to a point to where Luke and Rey are talking about her parents, right? Because the big thing with Rey's story arc in Episode 7 is my parents. I have to stay on Jakku for my parents to come back for me. They're going to come back for me.
Yeah.
The guy, I forgot where it came from, but I saw it on Reddit somewhere, and the dude's like, it gets to a point to where Rey's talking about, what was it? The way that he delivered it was amazing, because it was like, she was asking Luke, like, oh, because she finds out that Vader is Luke's father, and so she's like, something about your father, and he's like, no.
This is in the movie?
No, this is the theory.
Okay.
So she's asking about Luke's father, and he says, no, you're my father, to Rey.
What?
Yeah. That apparently she's supposed to be a perfect clone of Anakin. Or not a perfect clone, but a clone of
A
Anakin.
female clone of what?
Yeah. Which is why she was able to tap into the Force, and why she's this special Force user.
But you know what the weird thing is watching that movie, I don't get the sense that like Rey is like the most powerful like Force adept Jedi or anything. Like she's probably Force adept, of course, but not like, you know what I mean?
I think
not crazy like Anakin or Luke or anything like that.
No.
It doesn't give that. It didn't give that idea. But like
there's
you said,
something special about her, which I'm hoping we find out in Episode 8. But there's something special about her where when I'm assuming the Knights of Ren go crazy on Luke's new Jedi Academy, that she's got to be taken off planet. Like, she's got to be saved for something.
Yeah.
And don't know exactly what that is yet, but I think there's something about her, and I don't think it has to do with her parentage. I think it has to do with her abilities in the Force. Like, I mean, ideally, the whole Star Wars, all 3 trilogies are going to be about the Skywalker family.
Yeah.
But I don't think she's a child of a Skywalker.
Like a biological child. And the interesting thing is that you mentioned that's not unprecedented because Luke's parents, quote unquote, were Joel Edgerton and what's his face, or the old Joel Edgerton. I forgot what his name. I forgot Owen Lars. Yeah, those were his parents. They were the people that raised him.
Well, his aunt and uncle, yeah.
His aunt and uncle. They were the people that raised him. So that's not unprecedented in this world, or even for the Skywalkers in themselves. Not to mention, Leia was raised by Jimmy Smits.
Yeah, adopted family.
Yeah, so they both were adopted. It's not unprecedented that she would be adopted.
And Leia wasn't a Latin.
No, she definitely was not. Okay, so my final question for you is, in the game, which is so cool, is they present it like a Star Wars movie. It has its own crawl and everything, and its own story, and it's basically like an episode of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
Do you think that if they wanted to bring this Starkiller character back, and they wanted to use him and Sam Witwer, because he definitely said he would definitely agree to do it, and I don't think he's doing anything better than Star Wars at this point. And they're jumping around. They're not just we're making the next movie chronologically. They're jumping around in these movies.
Yeah.
Do you think that would you be down for a Starkiller like Netflix series or a web series or something like that?
I could see a Starkiller Netflix series.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about having Starkiller modeled after Sam Witwer, is that you can get away with Sam Witwer playing maybe a little bit older Starkiller. And what I love about Sam Witwer is that he's into Star Wars. Like, he loves Star Wars. He was Starkiller, obviously. He voiced Palpatine in Force Unleashed 2. He voices Darth Maul in the Star Wars, Clone Wars, and Rebels cartoon. So he's back as Darth Maul.
And so he's a part of the LucasArts family.
Yeah.
And he's employed by them.
Yeah, and he's right now playing and representing a canon character in Darth Maul.
And also, he just happens to be a fucking badass, too.
Yeah.
So
he's physically fit, and I haven't seen him in any sort of like actiony roles, so I don't know what he's like as maybe like an action star, but they can really do I think it'll also kind of hinge on how successful Rogue One is.
Yeah.
But I could totally see him being a Starkiller, and it might not be a direct representation or a direct like sequel to the games. But even if he's like, maybe it's the perfect clone, like the continuation of his story.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's part of the, Emperor's Assassin storyline or something like that. But I would like to see a Starkiller storyline.
Or at least an appearance in something.
Yeah. I mean, as long as the appearance makes sense. Like,
let's be clear here. The Starkiller name appears in the 7th Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
It's the name of the base.
Yeah, Starkiller
base.
So
this idea that Starkiller is like, he's gone or whatever, it may not hold. He may still be around, and he may still appear.
I should know this because I've been playing the game, but I can't recall if they refer to him as Starkiller in the game.
In the game, he's referred to as the apprentice, and he's referred to as Starkiller, but his name, Galen Merrick, was only created for the novel, at the request of the person who authored that novel, but the name itself has been appropriated to the character, even though in the games never appeared.
Okay, yeah, because I don't remember it popping up, and that was the big thing. Is like, oh, it's Starkiller, named after Luke Skywalker's original name. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, Luke Skywalker's original name was Anakin Starkiller.
Yeah,
and then they changed it.
But Starkiller, I mean, I think if Star Wars: The Force Unleashed was canon, I love how it was tied into using the Malek family crest as a symbol of the rebellion, and I felt it tied in perfectly to the movies. And I mean, granted, it reveals the Death Star early on, and I think even if it chooses the canon light side story, it doesn't destroy the Death Star. I think if you chose the dark side version, it destroyed the Death Star. But I mean, I think it's a fantastic story, especially the first one. And it's something that I'd like to see some continuation on that's not just some pathetic clone that gets wiped out pretty easy in the game, in the sequel. So I'd like to see some more Galen Merrick.
I would like to see some more Sam Witwer.
Yeah, for sure. Sam, We're voting for you, bud.
Yes.